Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into a world where swords were sharp, stares were sharper, and even a humble toothpick could speak volumes about who you were. Imagine this, a crisp tatami mat beneath your feet, the soft rustle of a shoji, door in the breeze, and there, nestled just above the sash of your kimono, a tiny sliver of wood, a toothpick. It doesn't look like much. But in this world, it might just be the most underrated item a samurai ever carried. You wouldn't last 5 minutes in this era without one, not because of the food stuck in your teeth, but because of everything it meant. A world of subtle gestures, loaded silences, and yes, weaponized dental hygiene. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is in your little corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey, together. You're seated in a quiet room, walls made of paper and wood, the scent of hinoki cypress drifting through the air. There's a man kneeling across from you, silent, composed, a samurai in every fiber of his posture. He moves slowly, not from hesitation, but from the precision of someone who's trained to make even stillness look like an act of power. And there it is. As he finishes his meal and some grilled fish, miso soup, a neat bowl of rice, he reaches not for his sword, not for his fan, but for a small wooden toothpick tucked into the fold of his obi. He doesn't smile. He doesn't speak. He just places the tip gently between his teeth, chews once, then sets it on the lacquered tray with the same solemnity you might expect from placing incense at a shrine. You try to stay still, but your modern instincts are already doing backflips. You're thinking, wait, is he flossing? With dignity. In this world, the answer is yes, but also no. Because to understand why a samurai carries a toothpick, you have to let go of the idea that it's just for food or hygiene. You have to see it the way they saw it, as a statement, as a social signal, as a tiny, unspoken poem about honor, status, and the fine art of knowing when to shut up. See, back then everyone knew what you did after a meal mattered just as much as what you ate. Slurping was fine. Leaving a grain of rice in your bowl? Slightly rude. But pulling out a toothpick in full view, using it with confidence, then placing it carefully in a dish or folding it back into your robe, that showed you were someone who knew the unspoken rules. Samurai etiquette manuals from the Edo period describe the proper use of the kuwagata toothpick almost as delicately as they do sword maintenance. Pick from right to left. Never use both ends. Don't talk while doing it, unless you want to be remembered as that guy. And under no circumstance should your pick fall to the floor. That's the equivalent of dropping your dignity, literally. Even more curious, there were rules about where you place the used pick. Lay it across your empty bowl and it says meal complete. Place it in a small bamboo tube and return it to your sleeve. That's the samurai version of I might need this later. Practical and polite. You might think, isn't that a bit much for a toothpick? And yes it is, but that's the point. Because in Edo, Japan, every gesture mattered. Everything meant something, or risked being misunderstood. It was a society built on what was unsaid, a world where silence wasn't empty, it was loaded with context. And that little toothpick, it was a punctuation mark at the end of a silent sentence. But don't get too comfortable. The world outside that tea room isn't always so serene, and the humble little sliver of wood in your obi may end up being more than just polite tableware. Because as you're about to learn, in the world of samurai, even a toothpick can carry the weight of a blade. Now the shoji door slides open, just a crack. A breeze carries in the scent of rain on stone, and you hear distant laughter from the street. Somewhere nearby, another warrior rises from his meal, but his hand hesitates before reaching for his pick. You'll find out why in the next part, but for now, breathe slowly. You're doing just fine, and the story is only just beginning. The rain begins as a whisper, soft droplets tapping against the paper walls, like fingers drumming gently on parchment. You shift slightly, the woven mat under you creaking as your weight adjusts. Across the room, the samurai now stands. His presence still lingers like incense, calm, composed, and curiously sharp. You notice it again, that small toothpick tucked neatly into his sash. Not an afterthought, an accessory. Almost like a statement piece. This time, you're the one holding it. Yes, somehow you're him, or someone like him. You've just risen from a quiet meal, steamed sweet potatoes and pickled daikon, and the aftertaste still clings to your molars. So naturally your hand finds the toothpick. You roll it between your fingers. It's not flimsy. It's been carefully carved from a piece of hibba wood, fragrant and light. Smooth on one end, tapered, to a fine point on the other, but before you bring it to your lips, you pause. Because even this simple act, has ritual. You remember the morning's routine, how your retainer handed you a bundle of freshly prepared picks, wrapped in soft rice paper. How he bowed without speaking, as if to say, "May your day be precise and appropriately flossed." You think back to the old master's words, something he said while trimming his mustache in the reflection of his tanto, "Clean teeth, clear heart." You didn't really get it then. But now, in this moment, you kind of do. It wasn't just about removing food, it was about removing distraction. A samurai's day began early, before the sun. There was meditation, sword practice, calligraphy, and between those, hygiene. Oral care wasn't casual, it was a discipline, a way to signal control over the self. Of course, there was no toothpaste. Instead, you had a powder made of powdered shells and herbs. The flavor, slightly minty, slightly chalky, but refreshing in a way that makes your tongue feel like it. Just completed a short haiku, and after that, the picks, each one carved by hand, not mass-produced like the ones by the checkout counter today. The wood was chosen carefully. Heba because it was antibacterial, cherry for special occasions, and the very rare black persimmon wood reserved for the shogun's court, or so the rumor went. You wonder, did they actually work? Well, yes and no. The samurai were more prone to tooth decay than peasants, thanks to diets rich in rice and pickled sweets, but they prided themselves on having tidy teeth. To neglect your mouth was to neglect your blade. It was all connected. You start to realize a lot of these rituals weren't just for health, they were for presence, discipline, a way to prepare for the unpredictability of the day, whether it involved reciting poetry, mediating land disputes, or stabbing someone in a very polite duel. And, speaking of discipline, you remember how one of your comrades once tried to reuse his pick. Oh, the scandal. He thought no one would notice. Just a little rinse, a little tuck behind the ear. But the next morning, his superior presented him with a fresh bundle, wordlessly placing it on the floor, bowing lower than necessary. A quiet lesson. You are what you reuse, and no one wants to be second-hand splinters. There's something comforting in the repetition. Take, use, discard. Morning, meal, reflection. Toothpick, sheath, silence. You move to sit once more, your legs folding neatly under you. The scent of green tea floats past. Somewhere outside, a sparrow lands on the edge of a bamboo fountain. It chirps once, then pecks at the water, oblivious to your very serious internal monologue about hygiene as ritual. You can't help but smile, because in this world, where honor is sharp, swords are sharper, and silence is often louder than speech, the small things matter most, like the curve of a bow, or the way you hold your toothpick, and as you place it back into its little sleeve, nestling it beside your ink brush, you begin to sense something deeper, that maybe, just maybe, a person isn't remembered for the grand battles they fought, but for the grace with which they removed a sesame seed and the dignity with which they laid their pick to rest. And outside, the rain continues, soft, steady, like a story still unfolding. Sleepy yet? Good. The world is quiet. And tomorrow? Well, tomorrow might just involve poisoned toothpicks, hidden compartments, and the kind of subtle drama only a samurai could pull off. But for now, just breathe. Let the hush of Edo wrap around you like a blanket and drift with the rhythm of the falling rain. The rain lets up just a little, softening into that faint patter that makes rooftops sound like drums being tapped by ghosts with excellent manners. The sky beyond the shoji screen is pearl gray, and somewhere in the distance, a merchant yells, "About turnips." Not angrily, just with that dramatic flair Edo vendors love. You barely register it. You're busy adjusting your sash, because today you're not just any samurai, you're a samurai with a purpose and a toothpick. The streets are alive now. Wooden sandals click-clack along stone paths and parasols bloom like paper flowers in the crowd. You're moving through it, not hurried, not wandering, just gliding, the way someone does when they know they're being watched. Not because they're famous, but because their posture is doing something unusually correct. And there, across, from the rice vendor, you spot another samurai. He's not facing you, just leaning against a post, arms folded, a faint smirk playing on his lips. But what catches your eye is what's tucked into the fold of his sash. A toothpick. Not just any kind polished dark wood. Ebony could be, carved at the end like a dragon's claw. Subtle but deliberate. You feel the competitive itch behind your collar, because in this part of town, how you carry your pick says everything. The man nods, barely, but you feel it. Challenge, maybe, or just mutual respect between two warriors who flossed beside the edge of death. It wasn't always like this. Back in the Heian period, long before Edo, toothpicks were a courtly thing. Aristocrats would carry bundles of them in ornate boxes, pass them around at poetry parties like breath mints. They were called yoji back then and weren't disposable. Oh no, you wiped them, cleaned them, saved them like tiny friends. People carved their initials into them like little wooden diaries for your molars. Fast forward a few centuries, now you've got kuwagata, single-use, practical, and yes, still oddly stylish, some with little carvings, others dyed with tea leaves. Some even dipped in subtle perfumes, you know, in case someone happened to lean in close while you were removing a piece of scallion. But with all that beauty came rules. There was a whole etiquette around it. You don't chew. You don't bite. You don't point with it. And for heaven's sake, never lick it clean. That's the social equivalent of announcing, "Hi, I have no idea how to exist in public." You once watched a young apprentice do just that. Post-meal, mid-conversation in front of a court official. The silence that followed could have frozen hot tea. And then there were the subtle gestures, holding a pick in your right hand while glancing left. Suggests you're bored, rolling it between your fingers while sighing, passive-aggressive commentary on someone's table manners, tapping it gently on the rim of your bowl. You better really want someone's attention, because that's basically the samurai equivalent of throwing shade, but none of these compared to the most subtle power move of them all. The no-pick. That's when you reach as if you're about to use one, pause, and then don't. You just sit there, calm, still, as if to say, "My teeth are perfect. I have transcended all need." Only a handful of samurai ever mastered that technique. It was said the great general Takeda Shingen once went a full year without visibly using a pick, despite eating nothing but grilled eel and barley rice. Legend? Probably. But still, the streets whisper. Today, though, you're not trying to impress anyone. You find yourself ducking into a quieter alley away from the chatter and the clatter. There's a small bench under a camphor tree. You sit, breathe, pull out your pick and gently roll it in your fingers. It's smooth, warm from your body heat. You use it delicately. Not because your teeth need it, but because the ritual does. A breeze lifts the hem of your sleeve. You exhale. And for a moment, you're not a warrior, not a name in the clan ledger. You're just a person. Between bites, between battles, between expectations, you catch your reflection in a polished water basin beside the bench. For a second, you look peaceful, like someone who knows what matters. The crowd drifts on behind you. A cat yawns under a crate of cabbages. The toothpick slips back into your sash, right beside the dagger. Balance, you think. One for protection. One for parsley. And somewhere, you know, a scribe is recording the moment. Not in a grand book of battle, but maybe in a quiet corner of a diary titled "Odd Things Samurai Do with Sharp Sticks." You stand, you've got places to be, and possibly someone to duel, with words or picks, but mostly with presence, the kind that leaves no crumbs behind. You walk, not quickly, that would be undignified, but with the kind of measured calm that says, "Yes, I have a small stick in my belt, and yes, it matters. The street curves gently beneath your feet, a winding path of polished stones, dampened by the earlier rain. You pass lanterns still flickering under cloudy daylight, and stalls with grilled sweet fish sizzling on charcoal. Someone calls out about plum wine. Someone else sings, softly, slightly off-key, about lost umbrellas and love letters. But your mind is elsewhere, on silence, and how it somehow became a battlefield all its own. Because in the world you're living in, silence isn't just the absence of noise. It's a formal occasion, a coded language, a stage upon which entire dramas unfold without a word. And nowhere is this more apparent than in what happens after a meal. There you are again, sitting cross-legged on a veranda. You've just finished dining with a powerful daimyo, a man whose beard could qualify for its own title of nobility. No one speaks, that's the rule. Post-meal silence is sacred. It's a chance to reflect, digest, and avoid saying anything embarrassing while your blood is busy handling the rice. You can hear the wind passing through the pine trees. You can hear your own heartbeat, and then the sound. A soft clink. Not a sword, not a cough, a toothpick. You glance up, as much with your eyes as with your soul, and there he is. The daimyo, slowly bringing a pick to his mouth, the motion as graceful as a crane stretching in the morning mist. He uses it with subtle, rhythmic precision. No fuss, no spectacle. You panic a little. Was that your cue? Are you supposed to follow suit? Wait, has he signaled the end of the post-meal silence, or merely punctuated it with an ellipsis? You glance at the other samurai in the room. All of them have assumed the expression known as, "I am not here," and cannot be blamed for what happens. A classic. The thing is, no one wants to be the first to speak. That's a risk, but you also don't want to be the last to use your toothpick. That looks indecisive, and if you use it too enthusiastically, people will think you're hiding something in your teeth, or worse, your emotions. It's a minefield. You reach for yours anyway, calmly, confidently. Like you just remembered it, not like you were watching for the right moment like a cat eyeing a moth. The pick slides from its little cloth sleeve like a whispered secret. You bring it to your lips. And perfect, the timing, the angle, the brief downward glance as if tasting memory. You feel the approval in the room. It's not spoken, but it's there. Like when you get a nod from a stranger who also saw the weird thing that just happened. Mutual understanding, quiet respect, and just like that, the mood shifts. Someone clears their throat. Another samurai sets down his teacup with the faintest thunk. Conversation begins again, soft and careful, like stepping onto a frozen pond. You learn in these moments that the pick is more than a tool. It's a signal of control, of tact, of knowing when to take up space and when to elegantly retract. The people of Edo, they were masters of this kind of social architecture. Meals weren't just about nourishment. They were ceremonies of order. Everyone knew their role, their timing, their part in the unspoken opera of being seen but not staring, speaking but not disrupting, eating but not indulging. And somehow the toothpick became a kind of punctuation, a pause, a full stop, a quiet sigh in the shape of wood, which brings you back to that one meal you'll never forget. It was with an old swordsman, retired, slightly hunched, known mostly for teaching calligraphy now. You both sat by a koi pond, eating cold soba and grilled eggplant. You'd been nervous, hoping to impress him to ask for training, but you barely said a word, until he, without looking up, slid a toothpick across the table to you and said, "Better to pick your teeth with grace than to swing your blade in haste." He didn't elaborate, didn't need to. You both sat there, toothpicks in hand, watching the koi chase their reflections. No need for swords, no need for speeches, just wood and silence, and the sound of your thoughts being filed down into something sharper. You remember that day more clearly than some battles, because sometimes the most important lessons don't come with drums or fanfare. Sometimes they come in the quiet, between bites, between breaths, between people who understand that the point of the story isn't always the sword, it's how you carry the toothpick after. The path beneath your feet turns to gravel now, crunching softly as you step. The air has that gentle heaviness of late afternoon, Not quite sleepy, but thoughtful, like the moment between finishing a cup of tea and deciding whether or not to make another. You pass a row of shops, lantern makers, incense sellers, a man who carves tiny turtles from plum pits, and then, tucked between two houses, a narrow alleyway that you wouldn't have noticed if the wind hadn't carried. The scent of grilled sardines and something sharper. Cinnamon? No, clove, mixed with camphor. You know that smell. It's the smell of secrets. You duck into the alley because of course you do. You're the kind of person who follows clove-scented mysteries into shadowed corners. It's in your samurai blood, or at least in your curious molars. The building you find is small, discreet. A side door swings inward without resistance, and you're inside a dim room lined with scrolls, lacquered boxes, and little ceramic jars that look suspiciously unlabeled. A woman is seated at a low table, grinding something with a mortar, and, pestle, she looks up, smiles. "You're late," she says, as if you're old friends. You say nothing, because you're here for the toothpicks, not just any kind, special ones. She opens a drawer and reveals them. Thin, elegant slivers of wood, darker than any pick you've seen. The tips glisten slightly, and you know better than to ask why. You've heard the rumors. You've heard about those picks, the ones dipped in nightshade, or belladonna, or something from a pufferfish that shouldn't even be legal in a society this polite. Back during the Sengoku period, before the Peace of Edo, toothpicks weren't just for after meals. They were for after enemies. Assassins loved them. Not because they were flashy, but because they weren't. Who suspects the quiet man in the corner, casually chewing a piece of pine after a bowl of rice? Who checks the splinter tucked into a sleeve? And who really examines what a rival samurai presses between his lips before a duel? That's the genius. There's a famous story, probably exaggerated, about a court official who died mid-sentence during tea. He'd just returned from a banquet hosted by a rival clan. No wounds, no bruises, just a slightly blue tinge to the lips. A single pick found under the table, slightly chewed, slightly suspicious. The investigation was inconclusive, which is to say very conclusive but also very impolite to pursue, because the thing about poison picks, they left no trace. Not really, just a whisper, a rumor, a lesson. You never looked at casual hygiene the same way again. Back in the shop, the woman hands you a bundle, wrapped in oil paper, tied with red thread. "Don't use them by mistake," she says, amused, "and don't forget which pocket they're in." You nod, slip the bundle into your sleeve, right side above the wrist. The safe side, the not for after meal side, because of course you carry two sets of picks now, regular and irregular. That's the thing about being a samurai in a world that's both peaceful and full of politics. You have to be ready. For diplomacy, for duels, for digestion, and maybe, just maybe, for betrayal served on porcelain. You step back into the street, blinking as the light returns. The wind's shifted. Somewhere, someone plays a shamisen. You walk on, blending into the flow of foot traffic, just another warrior going about his day. Quiet, thoughtful, with impeccable dental discipline. No one would guess. No one would know that nestled inside your sleeve is a tiny splinter of death, carved from wood and soaked in legends. A weapon no bigger than your finger, more powerful than most swords and far more polite. The irony, of course, is that you hope you'll never need it. That peace, real peace, means never reaching for it. But it's there. Because in your world, honor means being prepared for everything, even the worst kind of aftertaste. And as you pass a street vendor selling tofu skewers, you glance at the small jar of free picks next to his tray and think, nice, but definitely not deadly. Enough, you keep walking. No one stops you, no one suspects a thing. You reach the bridge just as the sun slips behind the hills, painting the sky with lazy strokes of orange and rose. The wooden planks beneath your feet creak faintly, each step a soft conversation with time. A breeze moves past, warm and slow, carrying the faint scent of steamed chestnuts and something faintly metallic, sword polish perhaps, or just the memory of yesterday's tension. You lean against the railing and watch the river below drift past like thoughts too tired to stay still. A dragonfly lands on your sleeve. Doesn't move, it trusts you. You wonder how many warriors stood here before you, and how many of them were thinking about that story. The one you heard as a child, the one whispered between candle shadows, when elders thought you were asleep, about the samurai who defeated a master swordsman with a toothpick. No joke, you still remember every detail. The scene was always set the same. Two warriors in a clearing. One tall, one quiet. Both armed. Both staring, until the tall one draws his katana with the grace of falling snow and the quiet one pulls a pick from his sleeve, just a sliver of wood, and the tall one laughs until the pick flies, yes, throws it right at the swordsman's eye. Not fatal, but stunning. Enough for a second strike. Fast, clean. No blood spilled if the opponent yields, and in this tale he always does. And the lesson your uncle said as he snuffed the lantern with 2 fingers, the sharpest thing a man carries might not be his blade. It might be his wit. You smile now, remembering. That old tale is probably just that, a tale. But there were real warriors who turned that idea into technique. Tiny weapons, sleight of hand, redirecting focus, some even trained in metsubushi. The art of distraction, usually with powders or light, but occasionally with thrown objects, and yes, sometimes a sharpened pick. There's one scroll in a forgotten archive somewhere that describes the needle flick technique. No diagrams, just instructions so vague and poetic they sound like a lullaby. From the pocket of stillness, launch the whisper of splinters. Let the opponent blink once. No more will be needed. Historians still argue whether that line was literal or metaphorical, but you like to believe it happened. That somewhere, once, in the golden twilight of a fading empire, 2 men met in silence, and only one walked away, his sleeve a little lighter, his breath calm. You roll a pick between your fingers now, not one of the poisoned ones, just a regular, honest sliver of cedar. You feel its grain, its slight imperfections, the way it catches the light just so. Could you do it? Could you actually win a duel with a toothpick? Well, probably not, but you could definitely distract someone long enough to run, and sometimes that's the smarter move. You laugh quietly at the thought, the kind of laugh that stays in your throat and shakes your shoulders a little. The dragonfly on your sleeve flutters once, then settles again. It approves. You hear footsteps on the bridge now, slow, deliberate. Another figure in a simple kimono, sword at his side. He doesn't look at you, doesn't have to. He just stops nearby and leans on the rail, eyes on the water. You glance, subtle, quick. He's carrying a pick too, not tucked in the sash. Held, openly like a declaration. You nod once, slowly. He nods back. No words. No duel, no drama. Just 2 warriors watching the river, each with a toothpick in hand. Not as a weapon, not as a gesture, but as a kind of acknowledgement. You've both survived another day, and maybe in this world, that's victory enough. The dragonfly lifts off your sleeve and drifts down toward the water, wings like stained glass catching the last of the sun. You take a breath, the kind that fills the whole chest, not because you're tense, but because you finally remembered you could. Then, with care, you place the pick back into your sleeve. Not flicked, not thrown, just stored. Ready. As the light fades and the lanterns flicker to life behind you, you step off the bridge and head back into the city. 1 foot in tradition, 1 in silence, and both in a story still being written. The streets are quieter now, not empty, just hushed, like the city itself has taken a long breath and is holding it in reverence for the evening. The footsteps you hear are soft, deliberate, cloaks brushing stone, a dog barking once in the shade. Distance, then thinking better of it. You move past shuttered shops and temples half lit by lantern glow. You know exactly where you're going, to the tea house by the cypress grove. Not for tea, not even for company, for observation. Because if there's anywhere in Edo where the toothpick truly reveals its secret lives, it's not the battlefield or the dinner mat. It's here, in the tea houses where the real duels happen. But instead of swords, there are glances. Instead of strikes, there are sighs. And instead of death, well, usually just mild embarrassment and expensive bills. You step inside. The wooden floor soft under your tabi. The hostess greets you with a bow so elegant it could be patented. She says nothing. She doesn't have to. You're a regular now. You know your way. You're led to a small room where the paper windows glow with soft amber light. The table is low, lacquered, and absurdly clean. Incense burns quietly from a shell-shaped dish. A geisha kneels in the corner, tuning a shamisen. She nods once at you, the kind of nod that somehow communicates welcome. I see you brought your soul. And no, we don't have sake with gold flakes tonight. You settle in, tea is served. It's warm, grassy, a little bitter, perfect. Then comes the plate. Artfully arranged slices of daikon, sea bream, and 2 delicate rice balls that look like they were assembled by woodland spirits with tweezers. And next to them, a toothpick. Not plain, not ordinary. This one is wrapped in a tiny piece of red silk thread halfway down its length. The wood is pale, hinoki, you think, and polished to a near glow. You don't touch it. Not yet. Because this is part of the dance. The woman seated across from you, older, graceful, eyes like ink on water, picks up her own toothpick and balances it lightly across her chopsticks. A message, or maybe just etiquette. But in this room, everything can be both. The geisha begins to play. The notes are sparse at first, then settle into a soft rhythm, the kind that loops just enough to blur time. You sip your tea. The woman across from you takes a single bite of daikon, then gently touches the toothpick to her lips. Just once. No use, no flick, just touch. A gesture. A pause, and suddenly you understand. This place isn't about food, or tea, or music. It's about reading. Reading the pick, the posture, the pauses between pickups and put-downs. It's social choreography performed in whispers and wood. A language with no vowels, only tension. You recall an old saying you once heard from a retired tea master. In war, we draw swords. In peace, we draw conclusions. You smile. The woman across from you smiles too. Not because she heard your thought, but because she likely had the same one. This is the realm where the pick becomes a compass. It shows who's polite, who's insecure, who's hiding something behind practiced grace. A nervous guest chews the end. A flirtatious one spins it. A liar drops it, then picks it up like it never happened. And if someone leaves theirs behind, gun used, perfectly clean, it means they didn't trust the meal or the company. You glance again at the pick beside your plate. It's still there, waiting, like a choice that hasn't been made yet. You lift it, slowly, gracefully. Not to use it, no, that would be too loud in this quiet war, but to turn it gently in your fingers, letting the silk thread catch the candlelight just enough to say, I understand the rules. The geisha shifts the tune, letting a higher note hang just a second longer than necessary. Someone coughs lightly in a neighboring room, and then nothing. Just the sound of your own breath and the silence between the strings. You place the pick down, parallel to your chopsticks, not angled, not crossed. A signal, simple and clear. You're not here to win, you're here to listen. And in this world of invisible threads, wordless stories, and sharp slivers of meaning, listening is the most dangerous thing of all. The woman rises, bows. She leaves without speaking. You finish your tea, no drama, no duel, just a game played with grace and a weapon never drawn. And as you step back into the cool air of the night, you tuck the toothpick into your sash, not for use, not for defense, but because, in a world where even silence has choreography, you never know when you'll need to make a statement. You walk alone through a narrow back street, the sky now a deep indigo, just beginning to blur the edges of lantern light into warm halos. The ground is damp from earlier rain, and the reflections of paper lanterns wobble with each step, like memories that almost make sense. There's a chill in the air, not unpleasant, just enough to make you draw your robe a little tighter, like the night is reminding you that you're still here, still present. And as your hand adjusts your obi, your fingers brush it, your toothpick, still tucked into its usual spot, still untouched since the tea house. You don't pull it out this time, you just let it remind you it's there, like a tiny heartbeat, beside your ribs, silent, constant, watching. You turn a corner and nearly collide with a man in robes slightly too fine for this neighborhood. He bows, you bow. You both apologize in unison. Then you both pause, for one moment too long. And that's when you see it. He's dropped something, a pick, just for a second, and just as quickly, he scoops it up and continues walking like nothing happened. But it did happen, and that's the thing, because in Edo, dropping a toothpick wasn't just a hygiene accident, it was a moment, a message, a mistake, yes, but one that said volumes. You remember the first time it happened to you. You were just a young samurai then, not even a full retainer yet, nervous, still trying to figure out whether you were meant for war or for, well, whatever this is now. You were sitting at a formal dinner surrounded by men twice your age and 5 times your confidence, and after the final course, as you reached for your pick, smooth, simple, nothing fancy, it slipped, fell clattered, on the floor like a stone dropped into still water. The room froze. No one looked at you directly, of course. That would be rude. But the shift in posture, the way conversation paused for half a breath longer than it needed to, it was like being politely exiled from grace. You bent to retrieve it, slowly, silently. You placed it to the side, untouched. And then you waited, for judgment, but none came. Instead, the elder next to you simply nudged his own pick toward you. A gesture, not a pity gift, no, a second chance, a signal that everyone stumbles. What matters is how you hold yourself afterward. So now as you watch the man disappear into the night, pick freshly recovered and pride slightly bruised, you smile, because you know that feeling, and you know that he'll remember it, forever. It's funny how something so small can shape memory. A sliver of wood, a fall, a glance, a lesson. There are people, you've heard stories, who've built entire reputations around their toothpick habits. A merchant in Nihonbashi who only uses ivory picks with gold inlay, even though he sells dried sardines. A kabuki actor known for twirling his pick between acts, spinning it with such elegance that some fans thought it part of the choreography. And then there are the rules. Oh, the rules. There's a whole book somewhere written by a minor noble who lost a bet and had to compile The Social Philosophy of the Edo Toothpick. Chapter titles included gems like Of Ends and Means, Choosing the Correct Angle, and To Share or Not to Share, Hospitality or Horror. But among all the etiquette, one rule stands out. Don't drop it, not because it's shameful, but because it's vulnerable. It says, I lost control for a second, and in this culture, control is everything. So now, you carry your pick not just for its use, but as a quiet promise to yourself. Stay steady, even in silence, especially in silence. You pass a young couple arguing gently in the shadows, their words soft, but their body language screaming in footnotes. One of them taps a pick against her palm. The other clutches his unused. You smile again, they'll work it out, or they won't. But the picks say more than they realize. You continue on, and as the city folds itself into sleep, shutters drawn, footsteps faded, you walk with quiet certainty, your hands by your side, and the pick at your waist. Not dropped, not forgotten, simply waiting. Because in this world of ceremony and unspoken battles, grace is measured not in grand gestures, but in the steadiness of small things held well. The moon is higher now, not quite full but round enough to lend everything a gentle silver glaze. The rooftops shimmer with it, the trees bow in its direction, and the quiet feels more deliberate, like the whole city has agreed to whisper. You find yourself wandering through a residential quarter, narrow lanes, neatly swept stoops, the occasional bark of a house dog quickly shushed. Somewhere a flute plays, hesitant like someone learning a song from memory. You pause at a small gate, not grand, not marked, just a gate. But you know, this is where it happened. Not the duel, not the scandal. Something smaller, more dangerous in a way. This is where you once received a letter, folded carefully, slipped beneath your door at dawn. And inside, a toothpick, wrapped in paper tied with a silk thread and scrawled beside it in delicate brushstrokes. Next time I'll sit beside you. You never found out who sent it, not officially, but you had a guess. She always sat across from you. During formal dinners, the daughter of a minor clan lord, sharp eyes, quieter than the rest, always the last to finish eating, always the first to notice when you adjusted your pick with your left hand instead of your right. It wasn't love, not exactly. It was something rarer in a world like this: attention, mutual, intentional, wordless. Over the weeks that followed, your interactions never went beyond the boundaries of etiquette, but somehow a new pick would appear near your seat. Different wood, different thread color. Each one like a message. You kept, everyone still do, because in a society so steeped in protocol, where even your laughter had to follow rhythm, to receive a pick was an act of rebellion. Not loud, not reckless, just human. There's a reason why in certain provinces gifting a toothpick meant I would share every meal with you. It wasn't romantic, or rather it was, but in the way only people raised on silence and ritual can express affection. You remember hearing about a samurai who proposed to his partner not with a ring, rings weren't common, but by carving her a set of matched picks. One cherry wood, one hinoki, bound together with red thread. She accepted. Not with words, just by using one of them during a family dinner. When people ask you now if you've ever loved, you think of that night. Not of fireworks, not of poetry, just of that paper, that handwriting, that single sliver of polished wood. You never responded, not directly. The world you live in doesn't make room for such risks, not when names and alliances carry more weight than emotions. But one night during a moon viewing gathering, you left your pick behind, wrapped in cloth, resting near her cup. You never spoke about it, but you noticed at the next gathering she used it, and that was that. No promises, no consequences, just a shared moment, suspended in silence, like dust in lantern light. Now, standing in front of that old gate, you wonder if she still remembers, if she still tucks picks into her obi with the same grace, if she ever kept that one you left. You hope so. Because in a world full of ceremony and expectations, sometimes the most radical act is a small, splintered thing offered gently to another. You step away from the gate and back into the night, and, for just a moment, your fingers reach into your sleeve and feel the familiar shape of your current pick, warm from your skin, light as breath. It reminds you, everything speaks, even the tiniest gesture, even something as seemingly trivial as who you're willing to share a toothpick with. The city narrows here, not in size but in rhythm. The paths twist a little tighter, the walls lean a little closer, and the lanterns glow like secrets just barely visible. This is the district where formalities loosen, where rules are still. Followed, yes, but with a kind of sideways grin. The marketplace is long closed, but you know the streets never truly sleep. And here, in the alleys once walked by poets, thieves, and Ronin, with too many regrets and too few obligations, you remember something else, a battlefield, not of swords or shouts, or banners flapping in the wind, but of calm stillness, and a very strange samurai named Jiro. You met him during the winter festival in the outer ward years ago. There was snow on the roofs, ash in the sky, and miso soup so hot it burned your tongue twice. Jiro was short, stocky, and possessed the kind of confidence usually reserved for people who'd survived 5 duels and a bear attack, which, according to him, he had. You weren't sure what to make of him at first. He carried no sword, just a walking stick and a pouch of dried persimmons, and of course a pick, always visible, always a different one. One day bamboo, the next carved bone, the next dyed blue with indigo. He was famous in his own way, not for fighting, for what came after. Because whenever tension rose, a misstep at court, a misdelivered poem, a land dispute about river stones, Jiro would arrive uninvited and sit between the rivals, and then, casually, almost lazily, he would reach into his sleeve and produce a toothpick, not just to use, but to use slowly, carefully, with a sigh so deep it seemed to silence the world. The message was clear. I am not concerned, you shouldn't be either, and somehow it worked. People calmed down. Voices dropped, cups were refilled, insults softened. A man once drew half a blade, only to lower it again when Jiro tapped his pick twice against a ceramic sake flask and muttered, "This is a terrible moment to have dirty teeth." You asked him once why it worked. He shrugged, said something about rhythm. People think power is loud, he told you, but it's mostly timing and stillness. Most duels happen long before anyone draws steel. He offered you a pick once, plain, pine, no carving. Try it, he said. After your next argument, or before, you did, and you've never really stopped. He had a way of reminding people that composure is contagious. That quietness, when deliberate, can be louder than any roar. You last saw Jiro during the Tanabata festival. He was sitting on a bench feeding sparrows rice from his palm. His pick was balanced behind his ear like a monk's brush. He looked at you once, smiled, and said, "There's only one duel left for me, and I plan to be too polite for it." You don't know what happened after that. He may have wandered into the mountains or the next town, or simply faded into the legend he'd quietly authored. But the lesson stayed, that a pick, handled well, could disarm more than any katana. That pause was power, and that you don't need to win an argument if you never enter it in the first place. You stop walking now, near a shuttered restaurant. In its window, a pair of picks rests in a dish beside. An empty sake cup. You smile at the symmetry, at the stillness. You sit on a nearby step listening to the quiet thrum of a shamisen from a distant room. You pull your own pick from your sleeve. You don't use it, you just hold it, feel its grain. Let it rest in your hand like a thought. You wonder how many duels you've avoided this way, how many sharp words you swallowed, not out of fear, but because you'd already made peace with them by the time the pick touched your lips. The wind passes, and somewhere in the hush that follows, you hear Jiro's voice again. Nothing worth proving is louder than a breath. You sit a moment longer, then slip the pick away, still undefeated, still whole, still politely dangerous. You rise slowly from the step, brushing the dust off your sleeves as if shaking loose a mood. The air has cooled further, tinged now with that distinct nighttime clarity, like everything around you has exhaled. And as you stroll past the darkened noodle stands and shuttered mochi shops, you can't help but think about the people who aren't samurai, and how they've started to carry picks too. It wasn't always this way. For a long time, the pick was a symbol of status, something only the warrior class or nobility would dare to make visible. Like a monocle in the West, or owning more than one pair of shoes in a world where most folks go barefoot. But things change. Edo is full of imitators now, merchants, scribes, even apprentice lantern makers, all eager to borrow the posture of the samurai. And nothing, it turns out, is easier to imitate than a piece of polished wood tucked into a sash. You first noticed it at a market last summer. A fishmonger, burly and sun-scorched, squatted behind his stall, picking his teeth with something far too ornate. It had a silver inlay, tiny wave patterns. It was a statement, and he was performing it. Elbow out, gaze steady, like he'd seen a samurai do it once and practiced in front of a reflective eel. You asked him where he got it. He winked. "Gift from a customer," he said. "Told me. I had noble gums." You didn't argue. Who could later at a sack bar you watched two young courtiers argue not about politics or poetry or marriage prospects, but over what wood was in season for picks. One swore by plum, the other claimed maple was more emotionally stable. Neither of them looked like they'd ever cut firewood in their lives. Then came the trend of scented picks, cinnamon, ginger, even sakura-infused ones that left your breath emotionally fragrant, whatever that means. There was a shop in Ginza that sold nothing but designer picks. It had a waiting list for wood shavings. And of course, the black market responded, counterfeit picks, fake. Inlays. One scandal involved a daimyo's son who used what he believed was sandalwood, only to be publicly shamed when it cracked mid-use. Bamboo dyed and disguised, a toothpick scandal. You'd laugh, but people genuinely wrote poems about it. Still, it wasn't all farce, because among the trends and the tryhards, something else was happening. Ownership. Ordinary people were making the pick their own. You met a seamstress once, sharp as a blade, hands always moving, who carried a pick not in her obi, but sewn into her sleeve hem, said it kept her calm between clients. Whenever a customer asked too many questions or changed their measurements again, she'd quietly press her fingers to the pick, like a talisman. "I don't use it," she said. "It just reminds me that I could." And you respected that. You've always believed that the pick's power isn't in its function, it's in its presence, its possibility. You saw it in the theater too. Actors started integrating picks into performances, not for realism, but as character signals. The cunning villain flicks his. The reluctant hero places his gently beside a bowl of sake before making a decision. The old priest never uses his, just gazes at it mournfully during soliloquies. And the audience understands because everyone now knows the pick means more than teeth. It means tension, grace, poise, the pause before the pivot. You once watched a kabuki play where a pick was passed between characters like a baton. No words exchanged, just the object, the transfer. And in the final scene, when the protagonist quietly snapped it in two, the entire audience gasped, because they knew that was the real duel. You're not bothered by the trend. You've learned to see imitation not as dilution, but as expansion. If the pick once symbolized the silent strength of samurai, maybe now it belongs to anyone who finds power in the pause, who understands that a breath held just long enough can say everything. You reach into your sleeve now, just to feel it, not to use it, just to remember that this tiny thing so easily missed has become something vast, a gesture shared across rooftops and alleys, poetry and performance, dinners and duels. And as you walk beneath the lanterns, their light softer now, flickering like eyelids just beginning to close, you smile. At the thought, a world where everyone carries a toothpick might just be a little more thoughtful. It's well past midnight now. The moon hangs high and unbothered, a pale sentinel watching over tiled roofs and quiet thoughts. The city has thinned. Footsteps are rare. Voices are murmurs behind paper walls. Even the wind seems to tread softly. You pass through a quieter quarter, the old part of town where the streets don't follow any map but instead curve around memories. Here buildings lean like old friends sharing secrets, and doorways sag just enough to remind you how many years they've seen. And just ahead, lit by a single flickering lantern, is a figure, a Ronin. You can tell by the way he stands, relaxed, but not careless, like a man used to scanning shadows without turning his head. His kimono is faded but well wrapped, and though he wears a blade, you notice something else tucked in his sash. A toothpick, not fancy, not even straight. A little curved at the end, like it was carved with a dull knife. You nod as you pass him. He nods back, and you both keep walking. There's an understanding there, an unspoken one, built not on class or coin or clan, but on something else entirely. The quiet dignity of those who carry small rituals into uncertain nights. Ronin, after all, know a thing or two about holding on to grace when structure disappears, about carrying civility in the absence of structure. When you have no master, no home, no role, you still have the way you carry yourself. And often that means carrying a pick. You remember one in particular, a Ronin named Sada. You met him in a border town years ago during a bad winter. He wore straw sandals and smelled like pine smoke and rice wine, but his hands were clean, his bow polite, and his toothpick was always visible. Not tucked away, not hidden, a badge almost, he claimed it was his last tie to a life before exile. I may eat like a dog now, he told you once over soup, but I still pick like a noble. You laughed at the time, but you never forgot, because Sada meant it. And the truth was, it worked. Even the roughest taverns gave him a little extra space when he sat. Not because they feared him, but because he moved like a man who still remembered what it meant to be precise. To be intentional. One night you saw him diffuse an argument between two gamblers. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't stand. He just set his pick on the table, then looked at it, then looked at them. They paused, blinked, then sat back down. It wasn't about intimidation, it was about interruption. That little gesture and that sliver of wood between two tempers reminded everyone there's a choice right now between grace and escalation. Between presence and impulse, and sometimes that's enough. You never saw Sada after that winter, but you think about him whenever you find yourself in places like this, dark streets, quiet corners, moments that feel like they could turn. Because it's easy to think of the pick as delicate, but for those who have nothing else, no name, no allies, no safety net, it becomes armor. Not against blades, against despair. Against forgetting who you are. You turn a corner now and find yourself in front of a weathered inn. The lantern sways gently in the wind. A dog snores near the entrance. You consider stopping, sleeping, but you're not quite ready yet. You reach into your sleeve and draw out your pick. You don't use it, you just look at it, not for its beauty or design, but for what it means, that you've made it this far, that you've kept walking, that like the Ronin and the seamstress and the actors and the fishmongers, you still know how to carry yourself, even in silence, even in exile, even when no one's watching. You tuck it back into your sash, then step into the night, and the shadows part, not like they fear you, but like they recognize something in the way you move. The path out of the old quarter spills you into a plaza, wide, moonlit, and almost unnaturally still. It's a space that usually hums with sound, merchants yelling prices, monks murmuring chants, children weaving between sandals and shadows. But tonight, it's like someone pressed pause. You walk through it slowly, as if your footsteps might startle the peace, and then you notice something unusual. At the far end of the square is a group of travelers, foreigners by the look of them, thick coats, unfamiliar boots, voices carrying the cadence of distant continents. They stand around a small brazier, sharing heat and stories you don't understand. One of them gestures animatedly. A story. Clearly. The others laugh, and then one does something that stops you mid-step. He pulls something from his pocket, a wooden pick, too long, too blunt, probably not made with intention. But there it is, a toothpick chewed at one end, waved through the air to emphasize a point, then casually tucked behind his ear. You blink, and then you smile. Because even halfway around the world, people get it. The universal language of the casual stick, not as elegance, not as statement, but as companion, a tool for the thinking mouth, a prop for the uncertain hand, a comfort object for the tired. And of course they have no idea about the rules, no ceremonies, no etiquette, no don't chew this way or never drop that. They wield their picks with abandon. But somehow, in the looseness, there's truth. You remember the old Jesuit journals from when the missionaries first came. They wrote confused paragraphs about the little weapon all samurai carry, and how they couldn't understand why warriors so fierce would spend so much time poking at their teeth. They assumed it was vanity or superstition. They missed the real story, but then again, maybe they didn't, because now you're watching one of their descendants laugh, pick in hand, waving it like punctuation, and you realize he does get it. On some level, the rhythm, the release, the human instinct to fidget after fullness. You pass the group with a small nod. One of them nods back. You doubt he understands why. But the exchange feels complete anyway. You continue on, weaving through empty stalls and closed shutters until you find yourself near the river. The water moves slow tonight, wide and dark, reflecting stars that shimmer like scattered grains of rice on lacquer. You sit at the edge, your knees drawn up. From your sleeve, you pull your pick. You roll it between your fingers, remembering the hands that carved it, not factory hands, not even artisan hands. Just your own one afternoon, months ago. Bored, restless, needing something to make. It's a little crooked, the wood is soft, not ideal, but it's yours. And as you sit there beside the sleeping city, you think of how far this little object has traveled, from palace halls to village benches, across oceans and back again. How many pockets it's rested in, how many teeth it's met, how many silences it's filled. Not bad for a sliver of wood. You place it gently on the stone beside you. Let it rest. Let yourself rest. Because tonight, you're not a samurai. Not a diplomat. Not a storyteller. Just someone by the water watching the world breathe. And in your lap, the pick glows faintly in the moonlight. Still. Steady. Enough. The river whispers beside you, as if telling you stories too old for language. The stones are cool beneath your hands. A breeze passes, soft, respectful, like it knows you're thinking, and you are. About how something so small, so easily lost, can become a kind of thread that ties a life together. You've lived through wars, treaties, mistakes, Honors both earned and inherited. You've seen blades drawn for less than an insult, and meals shared between enemies because someone remembered to bow low enough. But through it all, one gesture has remained, the pick. Not as a symbol, but as a practice. Something to hold, something to do with your hands when words have already done enough. A way to mark a moment without disturbing it. You think back to the first time you saw a shogun use one. You were barely old enough to tie your own obi, standing behind your father, knees trembling, trying not to breathe too loud. The hall was quiet, heavy with expectation. The shogun sat at the far end, flanked by guards and scholars, dining in near silence. When the meal ended, no one moved, until he reached, slowly, for a toothpick, held it, turned it in his fingers, then placed it unused back onto his tray. That was it. No speech, no decree. Just that tiny, careful motion, and the entire hall exhaled. Later, you asked your father what it meant. He said, "It means he's already decided, and no one will like the answer." You didn't understand then, but you do now. Because sometimes, the point of the pick isn't to do anything. It's to not do, to hold restraint, to show control, to say without saying, "I could act, but I won't." Not yet. You rise from the riverbank now, your knees stiff but your thoughts a little lighter. You leave the pick behind on the stone, not from forgetfulness, but from intention. Let it rest there. Let someone else find it. Or let the wind carry it downstream to join 1,000 other forgotten things that meant something once. You step back into the street, and as you walk, you begin to notice something odd. You're not alone. Not in the haunted way, not in the chaste way, just observed from balconies, doorways, window slits. People watching you pass, quietly, respectfully, each of them holding something in their hands. Small, wooden, familiar. A pick, some are simple, some carved, some wrapped in cloth, some held. Between thumb and forefinger like a prayer bead. No one speaks, they just watch, nod, acknowledge. It's not a parade, not a farewell. It's a recognition that you've carried this ritual far. Deeper than most, wider than you thought, that somehow in all your silence you've been heard. You don't wave, you don't bow, you just keep walking, the pick still warm in your sleeve, the river still echoing behind you, and the city, for once in step with you. Like maybe for just one night everyone remembered the quiet art of being present, and in their own way, said thank you. You walk until the lanterns thin out and the rooftops fall behind. The stone paths give way to soil, soft, damp, forgiving. Trees arch overhead, their branches whispering together, brushing stories back and forth in the wind. You've left. The city now. The last flicker of town fades behind you like the end of a candle. Not extinguished, just retired. Ahead, a hill. You climb it slowly, your feet pressing gently into the earth. There's no urgency, just rhythm. Just the sound of your own breath and the occasional crunch of a twig beneath your heel. At the top, the land opens, a clearing beneath a wide stretch of stars. The sky here is so vast it feels like you've stepped inside a bowl made of ink. You sit beneath an old tree, its bark gnarled and wise, and lean back until your shoulders press into its strength. You reach into your sleeve one last time, and there it is. Your pick. The same one you've carried this whole time. The one that passed through tea houses, alleyways, duels of silence, stories whispered across balconies and shared beside bowls of fish and rice. This little piece of wood has traveled with you like a loyal thought, always present, always ready, and never louder than it needed to be. You turn it in your fingers now. Feel the grain. Notice the way the light from the stars catches the edge. And then you do something simple. You press it gently into the earth beside you, not buried, just placed, like a flag without a country, like a sentence that ends, not with a period, but with an ellipsis. It's not an offering, not a surrender. It's a pause. Because that's what this has all been, hasn't it? One long, deliberate pause. Between meals, between battles, between lifetimes. You close your eyes, and the story softens around you. The night air folds itself into your robes. The wind tucks a blanket over your thoughts. The stars blink slowly. like they're trying not to wake you. And everything, the city, the stories, the tiny slivers of wood, all blur gently into the hush. You are still. You are safe. You are remembered.